الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء وسيد المرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله, brothers and sisters. So, continuing with the seerah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we mentioned in the previous lesson some the world situation on a general scale. We'll slightly go into some more specific points concerning the Arabian Peninsula, because that's where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose to reveal or choose to find the Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, reveal the Quran to him alayhi salatu wasalam. So more specifically, the Arabs were predominantly that they were a tribal people, and we can categorize them into two different types of people. They were the nomadic Bedouin people who would move around, travel. And secondly, that they were the city dwellers. And an example of that were those people who resided in Mecca. Now, the types of people that were in the Arabian Peninsula, as we mentioned, that they were into idol worship, polytheism. You all know that Nuh alayhi salatu wasalam was sent to a people whom that they had taken 5 righteous individuals and began worshipping them. 5. And the names of these people were carried through the generations, even to the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So there were actual tribes at the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam who worshipped these what were now idols. So, for example, if you take the tribe of Hudayl ibn Mudrika, they worshipped Suwa', and the tribe of Kalb, that they worshipped Wad, and Mudhaj, they worshipped Yaghuth, and Khayawan, that they worshipped Ya'uq, and Himyar worshipped Nasr. So these idols, which are all mentioned in Surah Nuh in verse number 23, these continue to the generations. And this is the danger of polytheism, and its the deep roots that it can take with certain people. It doesn't just stay with certain people and then it dies out. No, it continues from one generation to the next. So other well-known idols that the Arabs, they worshipped, like Manat, and also Allat and Uzza. These were the very famous idols that the Quraysh that they worshipped. So they were a polytheistic people, and they had a number of different characteristics which made them the people that they were. Now, stating that they were a polytheist people into idol worship, not every single one was like that. There were some remnants, some individuals who refused to get involved in idol worship, and that these people were known as Hunafa, and that they didn't, involve themselves in idol worship, nor did they eat, meat that was slaughtered for idols. They kind of ostracized themselves away. They took themselves away from the polytheism that the Quraysh, that they were involved. Like Zayd ibn Amr ibn Nufayl, he refused to worship idols and eat food or animals that were slaughtered for other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now the Quraysh themselves, did they recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Yes, they did. They recognized Allah Jalla wa Ala as the supreme creator, the supreme sustainer and owner and controller of the affairs of all of the universe. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in various places in the Quran, from those, وَإِن سَأَلْتُهُمْ مَنْ خَلَقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ لَيَقُولُونَ اللَّهُ. If you were to ask them who created the heavens and the earth, Quraysh, they would reply, Allah. Allah is the one who created the heavens and the earth. He is in control of everything. However, they did not see themselves worthy. They did not see themselves pure enough to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala directly. So what they would do is that they would go through these idols. They would go through who were maybe at one time known as righteous people that they died, and then graves were built over those graves, and then idols were made, in conjunction with these graves, and then they would go through these to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is shirk. This is polytheism, and this is what the Quraysh, how they understood Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they recognized Allah's lordship, but they refused the tawheed, the oneness and the uniqueness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's worship, that we worship Him alone and we go directly to Him alone. They rejected that. They rejected that completely. So it's not sufficient, it's not enough for a person just to say that Allah Azza wa Jalla is the Lord, the sustainer, the owner and the controller of everything that is in the universe. That's an important aspect of tawheed, but it's not enough. It's not enough, because there are other religions on earth who accept that as well. If you ask Christians, they would agree to all of that. They agree that Allah Azza wa Jalla is the creator, sustainer, owner and controller of all of the affairs in the universe, but that's not sufficient. It's not enough for them to enter into al-Islam, for them to become a true worshipper of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because they commit shirk in worship. They associate partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in their worship by saying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a son, subhanahu. So there were some people at the time of the Quraysh in that era that we're talking about, close to the birth of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There were individuals who refused to worship idols. There were other Arabs who had also become Christians and become Jews, but they were not in any great number. They were not in any great number in the Arabian Peninsula. The majority of Christians were, of course, following and part of the Byzantine Empire, and there were some Jewish tribes that resided in what was known at that time as Yathrib, which, as we know now, is called Al-Medina. So there were 3 tribes, and as we come later into the Sirah, we'll make it known as to the significance of these particular Jewish tribes. So by and large, the Arabian Peninsula was full of shirk, full of disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and lots of dhulm, lots of oppression. And some of the kind of things that the Arabs at that particular time, the things that they got involved in, were strange practices concerning women, in marriage, in ownership, in how they would treat children, especially daughters. As you know, that they would at times, if they weren't from the Ashraf or from honored people, having daughters was seen as something wrong. To look after daughters, this is not something that you can carry your lineage with. So they themselves would, at times bury their daughters, their baby daughters. They would bury them alive. Iyadhan billah. And other things like women, that they were treated like merchandise. Women were bought and sold. So they were equal and on par with camels, as you buy and sell. Okay, so they had very little value at that time. Islam, of course, came to correct and change this, and that there are many verses in the Quran that address these issues. So it's very important that when you look at the Meccan verses, those verses that were revealed in the Meccan period before Hijrah. For example, in Surah An-Nahl, okay, it's chapter 16, verses 58 and 59. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala specifically talks about the people, that if they were giving glad tidings, and the glad tidings Allah Azza wa Jalla tells us is bushir, if they're given glad tidings of a female child to any one of them, ظَلَّ وَجْهُ مُسْوَدًّا, that their faces would turn full of darkness, وَهُوَ كَظِيمٌ, and that they would become full of inward grief. If they had a daughter, that they would look at themselves, he hides himself from his people because of the evil, what he perceives to be evil, that he has been informed of. Shall that person keep the daughter and be dishonored, or should he bury her in the earth? Certainly whatever decision that they come to is an evil decision. I keeping your daughters a dishonor, or to bury them? Which one is it? Both of them are evil decisions that they would come to. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addresses these people concerning the women folk in Meccan verses. And other verses, as in even in Juz Amma, وَإِذَا الْمَوْءُودَةُ سُئِلَتْ بِأَيِّ ذَنبٍ قُتِلَتْ. And when the female infant is buried alive, for what sin was she killed? So there are ayat in the Quran which address the mindset of these, of the Quraysh, the polytheist Quraysh at that time. And this is very important, that when we read the Quran, we understand the context of some of these verses and who they were addressing and how Allah Azza wa Jalla was addressing them. At times as well, that they would, just if they didn't believe that they had enough wealth and money, that they would kill their children. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala likewise addresses that, for example, in Surah Al-Isra. وَلَا تَقْتُلُوا أَوْلَادَكُمْ خَشْيَةَ إِمْلَاقٍ. That do not kill your children out of fear of poverty. نَحْنُ نَرْزُقُهُمْ وَإِيَّاكُمْ. That we will provide for them and for you. That indeed killing them is a great sin. So this was the kind of behavior, these are the kind of things that the polytheist Quraysh that they used to do. Likewise, if they were married to a woman and then he divorced her, he would take her back. That's something in Islam that we have as well. However, Islam came to control that. That a man, if he divorces his wife on the third occasion, that they can no longer be together anymore. Whereas in previous times, in times of al-Jahiliyyah, that the husband would divorce her, leave her in her waiting period, just before the end of it, he takes her back. And he would keep doing this, just to punish her. So, women that they did not have a good standing in that society, 1450 years ago, 1500 years ago. It's a very bad situation for women at that time. And this is not something specific to this part of the world. In fact, women in many places had very little value. And if you look at developed countries, women only secured, by their own yardstick, if you like, in terms of rights and voting and permission to own property. This only came into existence within the past 100, 120, 130, 140 years in many Western countries. Before that, the woman really had no right to inherit, to own anything. Whereas Islam, Allahu Akbar, gave the woman all of these rights, gave the woman what she was deserving as a human being, many centuries, more than 1,000 years than many Western countries. So this is something that Islam, we should be, of course we say proud, but of course we should be honored with. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us revelation, gave us guidance on these matters, and claims that Islam is backward in so many things. Well, if one wants to judge Muslims, then they can judge the Muslims. And we have many mistakes and we have many shortfalls. But looking at Islam, then you have to look at Islam. And that you don't necessarily judge the deen or the religion itself by the behavior of certain individuals. So as you look at Islam and it's pristine and perfect, in what it was revealed to us, you'll find that, subhanAllah, Islam gave mankind so many things. Another well-known characteristic that the Arabs that they had is that they would have no issues with engaging in war. Okay? And they really didn't need an important reason at that particular time to have battles with one another, where battles and wars may go on for more than a generation at a time, 30 or 40 years. A war would continue. Now when we say war, how can a war exist for 40 years? We're not talking about people literally on the battlefield for 40 years. and people bringing supplies for 40 years. No, not like that. But the people are at conflict. There's a conflict between two different people for 40 years. For example, maybe a common example you've heard before, that a camel that belonged to a tribe, that it walked onto the land of a different people, and that person saw that and he killed the camel. And then these two particular tribes began warring for 40 years over this. So war was a constant reality. Between the Arab in the Arabian Peninsula at that particular time. That being the case, that there were many negative characteristics and negative things that they carried, also they had many honorable and many positive attributes. And this is something that needs to be mentioned as well. Things like, it is said, they had a natural intelligence. I mean, their language, or the Arabic language itself, is the best language on earth in its expression and how you can describe things. For example, you'll find that the word honey, that there's more than 80 words for the word honey. Or for example, there's more than 90 for the word fox. And you have 500 different words that can describe a lion. And maybe 1,000 words that can describe a camel. Now you may be questioning, how can you have 1,000 words for one animal? Okay. Of course you have the word jamal and you have the word ibl. Okay. These are common words. Naqa. These are 3 words. There's all, a camel, male camel, a female camel. But then the Arabs would have words that describe the position or the state of a camel, whether it was sitting down, whether it was lying down, the time of year, its age. They have so many different words for the camel. For example, the amount of years that it lives. If it's 1 year old, 2 years old, 3 years old, 4 years old, they have different names for the camel. So it's a very rich, extremely rich language. And the way that they would speak with one another and converse with one another, no doubt shows intelligence, because they valued poetry. They valued poetry a great deal, and that they would speak with one another, converse with one another in poetry. This was all done by memory. This is all done from what they can remember. And just today, because there are many who claim that, well, by memory maybe you can forget. Especially when we're talking about the relaying of the Quran from one person to the next. Maybe that person forgot. Maybe they missed a letter. Maybe they missed this. Maybe they missed that. I was just listening to the radio today, and there was talking a particular professor, and he was looking over documents that were documenting a particular event in history. And he said that the person who had actually written down the events that occurred around that particular time had so many doubts about what he had written, whether it was actually correct or not, whether it was true. I just caught the end of the program that was on the radio, but point being that even by certain standards that, to substantiate information that reaches us, only if it's written, then we can accept it. Only if it's written, then we can validate it. In fact, that information that's passed on, memorized by memory, and people witnessing that, is far more
oral.
Yes, no, that's not the word I'm looking for. It is oral, yes, but it is far, as an evidence, far more powerful. The fact that you have so many people corroborating that information to say, yes, this is how it was, as opposed to one person writing a document. That one person could write as he likes. But if you've got, tens and 50 or 100 people all having memorized and known, stating the same thing, that's far more powerful as an evidence, as opposed to a person writing a document. So this is one of the great qualities that the Arab, that they had at that time. Also other things like generosity and bravery, they held these things in great esteem. These were very important for them. and things like truthfulness, keeping promises, and being honest. These were traits that they had. And these are traits, of course, that is important for Muslims in general as well. And an example of that is when Abu Sufyan, who at that time was a polytheist, a mushrik, and he went to the Byzantine Empire because they used to have trade caravans. And Herakl, who was the emperor of the Roman Empire at that time, had heard about the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he was asking within the masjid, and we'll come to that a little bit later in the seerah. He asked, is there anyone that knows or is related or is from the qawm of this particular individual who is claiming nubuwwah, who is claiming prophethood? Of course, at that time, Abu Sufyan, not a Muslim at the time, he stood forward, radiallahu anhu, and he said, I am from the qawm or the people of this individual who is claiming nubuwwah. And a number of questions was posed. Does he have this and does he do that? And he said the truth. Even though at that time he wasn't a Muslim, but he said the truth. So they had qualities at that time which were very important for us, for us to mention, even though that they had lots of jahili practices in their ibadah, which of course is the biggest problem that they had. And the people can have great qualities in diyafa, in looking after people, in inviting people, in their generosity and bravery. I mean, these are all good, great qualities. But if the people are misguided in their ibadah, in their worship, then all of this really will not benefit them in the long run. Will not benefit in the long run. Because we were placed here to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we were placed here to serve Him. And if the people are not doing that for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you'll find that the people will do it eventually for their own wants and desires. So this was the situation around the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that shirk was prevalent. The people who were in charge of Mecca were a very high-ranking tribe called the Quraysh, and that they were in charge of Mecca, the Kaaba, and all its surrounding areas. And Mecca itself was on the trade route, a very important place. And so therefore people from Asham, people from the north in Syria, that they would come down through Mecca, and that they would travel also eastwards to Persia as well. So that they were very rich as well and very, very well off. Amongst the Quraysh, there were a number of sub-tribes as well, many tribes. And from these tribes, they had different ranks. There were higher tribes, like the tribe of Al-Makhzumiyya was a very high-ranking tribe, where you find other tribes were not as high-ranking as that. For example, Banu Shams, okay, they weren't as high-ranking as Banu Makhzumiyya. So they within themselves would have different rankings. Now we're going to mention maybe just because there's a couple of important incidents that happened just before the birth of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and in our next lesson, inshallah ta'ala, we'll start talking about the birth of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and how it occurred, what happened around that particular time. But there are two things important to mention. The first one is Abdul Muttalib, who was the grandfather of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and at one point in time would actually be the legal guardian, the one who looked after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That occurred for about 2 years or so. So Abdul Muttalib was known to have a highest rank amongst the Quraysh, well-known person. But his status grew even further when he was the one who rediscovered the well of Zamzam. As you know, the story that Ibrahim alayhi salam, he left his wife, left Hajar and Ismail alayhi salam, and he went away. And while he alayhi salam went away, Hajar came across water, a spring of water, which was to be the well of Zamzam. Over a period of time, that became lost. And he had a dream. Abdul Muttalib had a dream when he was told to dig at-Tayyibah, to dig, he was given different names, to dig al-Barra. Tayyibah meaning something was good, something Barra, which is something, to do with goodness and righteousness. And he was confused as to what is it I'm supposed to dig and what does all this mean. Eventually in the dream he was told that it is a well, and he went with one of his sons to find the well, and the well was found. And when the well was found, he claimed it. He claimed kind of control over it. So this gave him a higher rank or a higher status within the community. This is an important incident that occurred before the birth of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Secondly, a very important incident, and in fact that there was revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was revealed concerning this, and this is the story of Fil, the elephant. When Abraha from Yemen, who wanted to essentially change the dynamics of what was occurring in Mecca. Instead of the people going to Mecca as a trade route to have their Kaaba, place that people would congregate on, that he wanted them to come to Yemen from that direction. So as you know that he gathered an army, and he wanted to go to Mecca and to destroy the Kaaba. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions this in Surah Al-Fil, which is chapter 105 of the Quran. So this is another important incident, and at that time the years, they were not counted as we are counted in 2015, 1436. They didn't have that. They used to name the years by a particular event that occurred in that particular year. That's how that they would know and follow time. So something occurred in that year. Oh, that was the year of the elephant, when so and so came, and then they were destroyed. So this is a second important incident that occurred in the year of the birth of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Here we will stop inshallah ta'ala, because the next topic we will go on is to talk about the lineage of our beloved Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose him from amongst the Quraysh. So until our next lesson, barakallahu feekum wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.